Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be starting in a few seconds. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to discuss enablers and barriers of constructed wetlands as a nature-based wastewater treatment solution. So this presentation is divided into two parts. In the first part, we are going to share the results of a research project conducted by RTI and supported by consultants in 5 countries. And then we are going to share experiences from those 5 countries. And they are Senegal, Kenya, the Philippines, Jordan, and Dominican Republic. And I would like to remind everyone that you are welcome to add your questions in the chat, and then we are going to address all of those questions or as much as possible at the end. So feel free to type them at any time. In case you don't know RTI is an independent, nonprofit research institute dedicated to improving the human condition. My name is Carol Abu Rashid. I'm a senior project management specialist at RTI. And my technical expertise is in water treatment, water management, and agriculture. And I have with me a couple other colleagues from RTI, although this project was supported by multiple colleagues and consultants. I have with me Mark, who's a senior WASH technical advisor at RTI. His expertise is in WASH, economics, and the environment. And Megan is a trained environmental engineer who now supports projects evaluating science policy and program evaluation, translational science, and commercialization and the economics of innovation and new technologies. So in case you are not familiar with constructed wetlands are similar to natural wetlands. They're formed of plants, soil, microorganisms, and they treat wastewater through biological and physical processes without the need of energy, or chemicals. So they are natural, they have many advantages, they are biologically diverse, they're not expensive, they're more affordable than conventional wastewater treatment methods, and the water can be reused in agriculture or other purposes. And they can also help with flood control. So since they have many advantages, we were wondering why they are not more widely adopted in the developing countries where it's challenging to fund conventional wastewater treatment methods. So our goal is to understand the barriers and enablers of constructed wetlands in the developing nations. So we selected a few countries in different geographies, Dominican Republic, Senegal, Kenya, Jordan, and the Philippines for our research project. So after conducting research and concluding that this research hasn't been investigated before, we conducted informal interviews with experts on constructed wetlands in each country. And after that, we started the data collection through semi-structured interviews followed by a survey. The semi-structured interviews were done on a smaller scale, 10 per country, and based on the result of the survey, and we tried to obtain 100 responses per country from the 5 countries. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Megan now to go over the interviews, the results, and the survey development. Over to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Carol. So yes, for the qualitative methods, we conducted 2 sets of interviews. The first being a much smaller scale, very kind of independent, informal interview process with folks that we knew within country, a lot of those being our advisors that we have with us today, to kind of really just have a conversation with them about constructed wetlands in their country, what the basis of use currently is, and what they see as kind of the pros and cons to using constructed wetlands specific to their country. After talking with them, we created a semi-structured interview questionnaire where we spoke to at least 10 different people per country that were identified as people being experts in the WASH field. And we asked them questions around what they believe to be the enablers and barriers of constructed wetlands, asked them in their opinion, their expert opinion, what they believe the strengths and the weaknesses of constructed wetlands were specific to their country. And we wanted to gather those answers to enable us to create some sensible question and answer pairings for the larger survey that we knew we would develop at a broader scale among these 5 countries that were selected. And so the interviews really allowed the team to test certain types of questions too, to see if they would be of interest to ask a larger group of people as well. And so, these also targeted people from different sectors as well. So thinking about the WASH sector, not strictly in terms of academic expertise, but also private sector implementation, NGOs, and government as well. Next slide. And so the results of these interviews, the strengths of constructed wetlands, as Carol kind of stated, in the pre-read here, low construction costs and operational costs were seen largely as a strength, and also the fact that they're perceived as being good for the environment as well. Weaknesses, specifically being applicability to urban settings and the fact that constructed wetlands require a decent amount of space. So there's something that are seen as applicable in rural areas, but not necessarily adapted to urban areas well. So some of the solutions for adoption, some of the enablers, people had talked about the need for additional pilot projects to really proof test constructed wetlands at different areas and give people confidence that they are applicable to the settings that they're being tested in. And also just raising awareness as well, because we found out that a lot of folks did not know about constructed wetlands, which we will get into a bit later. Looking at the barriers too, some of the barriers for adoption, again, seeing this issue of awareness and lack of familiarity and knowledge about constructed wetlands in general. A lot of the folks that we talked to within the realm of government also cited the lack of policies and strategies directly supporting implementation of projects such as constructed wetlands as well. Next slide. And so here we can just see kind of a visual breakdown of the interview results that we had. These again being the interviews that were 10 professionals per country. So a rather small subset compared to the larger survey. But we can see here specifically that in the weaknesses of constructed wetlands, people do note again the space requirements and lack of familiarity. We can see that lack of familiarity and lack of knowledge being a barrier as well, mirrored on the right-hand side of your screen, the lower right-hand side, in terms of adoption as well, which we will see results for in just a bit. Next slide. So in terms of the survey that we ended up developing as a result of these more pointed questions with experts in the WASH field in these countries, we used those themes that prevailed in our analysis of those interviews to construct a larger survey in Microsoft Forms that would be deployed in these 5 countries, specifically targeting people within government, NGOs, academia, that are considered experts within the WASH field or have at least some experience within the WASH field itself to be able to speak to the effectiveness of constructed wetlands. And this was an online survey administered in the 5 countries. So it was administered via email, WhatsApp, and a QR code as well, so that folks could access that QR code for the survey specifically. And we solicited the survey via our network of professionals that we have here. So really using the snowball effect to garner more and more participants. And we also shared our survey on LinkedIn in hopes that we'd be able to find professionals within the WASH space that could also answer these questions. The English survey was translated into French, Spanish, and Arabic per the countries that are applicable to them. And we had targeted a response rate of at least 100 responses per country to give us approximately 500 responses overall, to be able to speak to statistical significance at least the top level, comparing these different WASH professionals generally within a confidence interval of 95%. Next slide. So the development of the survey, so we had questions about the the respondents' educational background, their professional experience. We did use skip logic to divide participants into two groups based on whether or not they had known about constructed wetlands prior to accessing the survey. So the group that had prior knowledge about constructed wetlands, they had about 25 questions that helped us characterize their exact experience and their comfort in working with constructed wetlands, as well as their opinions on what the barriers and enablers were for facilitating implementation of constructed wetlands within their country based on their lived experience. For the group that did not have prior knowledge about constructed wetlands, we provided them kind of a one-page overview of constructed wetlands, just about how they work physically, how they work biochemically. And we followed up that presentation of constructed wetlands with 6 survey questions, asking them about how they felt about constructed wetlands as a solution for their country based on the information provided within the survey. Next question. So this is just a very quick overview of what the form looked like. So these were just an example of the first subset of questions we had, which helped us characterize the survey respondents. You can see on the left-hand side was our English survey that was developed first. And on the right-hand side, this one specifically is our Spanish survey that was adopted to the Dominican Republic. And as I'd stated earlier, we also had French translations for Senegal, as well as Arabic translations for Jordan. And then in terms of the survey demographics, so we did end up exceeding our goal of 500 respondents by about 85. We had quite a few respondents that were engineers as well per country, which was great because we were targeting a lot of people that would likely have had direct implementation experience with constructed wetlands or comparable technologies. The median years of experience in the WASH sector for folks that we had engaged with was around 10 years for all participants. And the majority of people surveyed in each country, except for Senegal, were previously aware of constructed wetlands and their applicability for wastewater treatment. So we felt comfortable that we would get a good mix of individuals that, responses from individuals that had had that prior experience versus those that did not. Next slide.
Okay.
And I will hand this now off to my colleague, Mark.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending upon where you are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of the survey that we implemented. As Megan said, we asked people based on their background, whether they were experienced or had awareness of constructed wetlands, and we had separate questions for those people. So these are the responses from people who said they were aware of constructed wetlands. And so we wanted to understand what they thought were the primary benefits of constructed wetlands. And so we actually had one question where people were allowed to select all of the benefits, and then we said, what is the primary one? So the most common answer was the environmental impact of constructed wetlands, followed by the cost of construction and treatment effectiveness. From our understanding, this is that constructed wetlands have a positive impact on the environment, are often cheaper than the alternative waste treatment methods, and are highly effective at treating waste. And if you see, they did not mention that space requirements or aesthetic values were on their primary top strengths of constructed wetlands. When you go to the weaknesses, that's where space is the #1 most commonly cited weakness of constructed wetlands. They are known to require substantial room because that is how the primary designs are, even though that's not always necessarily true. There's also a weakness that they require significant technical skill to both construct and maintain. But there was also—
Apologies, Mark. Would you be able to speak a little louder? I think we hear you, but a little bit far.
Sorry. Not sure what's happening there, but the cost of construction is also listed here as a weakness. So just noting that some people saw it as a strength and some people saw it as a weakness. Please go to the next slide. In terms of the enablers and barriers, We find that the highest, most commonly selected enabler was national government support. I think this aligns with a lot of people's understandings or the reality that governments, in particular national governments, are often drivers of fecal sludge treatment plans or technologies and have that responsibility. But previous demonstrations of success and its effectiveness was the second highest enabler of increasing use of constructed wetlands. The greatest barrier is also funding and then national government support. That's a very important overlap because what you see here is how much the national government is aware or really understands and is interested in using these technologies is believed to have a large impact on the frequency of their use to treat fecal sludge. Next slide. Of these people who were aware of constructed wetlands, we asked them whether or not these should be used more frequently at the current rate or less frequently. And you can see across the 5 different countries we surveyed, a majority of respondents said that they should be used more frequently, despite having different baseline rates of usage of constructed wetlands. Next slide. Of those who were not previously aware of constructed wetlands, we asked them what they would like to know more about from constructed wetlands. We had given them a brief explanation of what they are, but what information would they need to better understand their use or their support of constructed wetlands. And the most commonly cited thing that people are interested in is the environmental impact, and the second is the treatment effectiveness. So this is really helpful for guiding future communication to people who are not aware of constructed wetlands. Next slide. Of those who are not familiar with constructed wetlands, based upon the information that we gave in our survey, which was just a brief explanation, we asked if they believe that they were an effective way to treat wastewater and whether or not they would be good for their country. And as you can see, a majority of respondents did believe that they could effectively treat wastewater and would be good for their country. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mark. Now we're back to with Megan. Over to you, Megan.
Thank you both. So thinking too, we had a lot of questions in the survey that had either multiple choice or single choice answers. But at the end of the survey, we also provided respondents space to provide just any text that they would like to tell us about their experience with constructed wetlands, if there were points that they would like to emphasize themselves based on their experience, or if there was something that we did not cover in the context of the survey that they felt was important for us to know as we look into this issue of barriers and enablers to constructed wetlands. So we did a thematic analysis around this open-ended portion of the survey. Of the people that responded to the survey, we had 423 people that provided text in that field. Only 269 of them were considered substantial and relevant to the topic of constructed wetlands itself. So within that context, we did a thematic analysis of those 269, and we found kind of these 5 themes that were overarching within that context. The need for raised awareness of constructed wetlands as a means for treating wastewater within the countries that we surveyed. Questions or opinions on the applicability of constructed wetlands in country-specific settings. A very strong need for a range of government support, both at the national and the local level, to enable broader adoption of constructed wetlands within the country. The need for communities where these constructed wetlands are being sited to be involved in the implementation and construction of constructed wetlands. And also just a general positive sentiment about constructed wetlands as an alternative treatment to wastewater. So here we just wanted to share some of the questions that really highlighted these themes from the thematic analysis. So within the context of awareness, emphasis was placed highly on raising awareness of constructed wetlands in both governing bodies to enable the regulation and the construction of constructed wetlands as a viable option, and within the general population to enable the acceptance of constructed wetlands as well. For applicability, while some folks were interested in seeing constructed wetlands adopted in urban settings, many individuals noted the high propensity for constructed wetlands to be adopted in rural settings as there is ample space, kind of echoing the sentiments we had heard before about lack of space being a barrier to constructed wetlands. Many respondents use that space to posit questions about the applicability of constructed wetlands within their country or in a general setting, especially those that did not have experience with constructed wetlands prior to this survey. In terms of government support, so respondents largely noted the need for local and national government support broadly to motivate construction and use of constructed wetlands, to provide and or identify funding or financing mechanisms for construction, and to implement sound regulations for proper construction and continued use of constructed wetlands in country. On the topic of community involvement, those noting the need for community involvement in constructed wetlands projects had more often been involved in the construction and or implementation of constructed wetlands within their country. They also noted the need to involve communities from all the way from early planning in terms of site selection, all the way through construction and ongoing maintenance as well. Next slide. So here we just wanted to again summarize some of the top strengths of constructed wetlands, weaknesses, enablers and barriers that we've heard throughout the interviews and the survey itself. The top strengths being that it is seen as a more environmentally friendly solution to wastewater treatment and management. The top weakness being that constructed wetlands need a lot of space, and that is always not an option in some countries. The strongest enablers, we saw national and local government support and demonstrated success being very strong in that area. And barriers, of course, being lack of funding and also the lack of support that exists right now at both the national and local government level. Next slide. And so thinking about, we talked a lot about the strengths and weaknesses of constructed wetlands. We talked a lot about the barriers and enablers, but what does this mean? What are kind of the next steps now that we know this information? So we found it interesting that, of those surveyed, engineers that had, previous hands-on work with constructed wetlands did not have significant differences in responses to barriers and enablers of constructed wetlands than those that did not. So, this may indicate that a lot of existing barriers are not driven by constructed wetlands themselves and their technical capability as a treatment source, but lie more in the implementation of these projects in country, specifically around the awareness of them as an option to treat wastewater at both the government and the community level. Individuals surveyed that had previously known about constructed wetlands prior to the survey did not have significantly different favorability than those that did not. So thinking again that this reinforces the idea that constructed wetlands can be a sound solution for wastewater treatment, as both groups that had and had not had that previous experience did not have statistical difference in favorability, and there was actually a general positive favorability for constructed wetlands overall. And then lastly, the top barriers and enablers identified in the survey can be used to help inform future implementation strategies. So thinking about the fact that a large number of people pointed to a lack of awareness and knowledge of constructed wetlands as a weakness of constructed wetlands themselves, and as a barrier to implementation, tells us that a successful implementation strategy must contain an educational component. And based on our results, successful strategies should also directly involve countries' environmental ministries, as well as community champions where these constructed wetlands are being built. And I will hand it back to Carol.
Thanks so much, Megan. So now we finished the first part of the presentation. We're gonna switch to sharing experiences from the 5 countries. But first, I want to mention that this research project, it was funded internally by RTI. And we want to thank also our other colleagues who supported us throughout this project and our consultants. So we're going to go over or to share experiences from Senegal first, followed by the Philippines, then Jordan, then Kenya, then Dominican Republic. And the reason we ordered them that way is based on the frequency of the implementation of constructed wetlands. So for instance, in Senegal, they are just at the pilot phase, while they are more widely implemented in Dominican Republic. So I'm going to turn it over to Theo Boutrol, who is a consultant in WASH and climate change. Theo also supported us in our research project in Senegal. Briefly, Theo is an environment and water management expert. His experience includes many countries, particularly Senegal. Over to you, Theo.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, so Senegal is a country with a very developed water supply sector system, especially when it comes to water. But the big challenge that we have here is a challenge with regard to sanitation, with concerns in rural and peri-urban areas where most of the population does not have access to a sanitation system. Now, when it comes to the bodies of the water Ministry of Water and Sanitation level, we have two public institutions that are in charge of sanitation. The National Sanitation Office of Senegal, ONAS, is in charge of the operation and maintenance of the sewage and rainwater sanitation facilities, such as the cleaning of drainage channels, for example. And then we have the Sanitation Directorate, DA, who is more in charge of the strategy and the policies around sanitation. Thanks. So for constructed wetlands, the various technologies that have been developed to treat wastewater are very expensive and too high-tech for sub-Saharan countries such as Senegal, even though we have lagoon treatment that is used in wastewater treatment plants that are used to treat wastewater in urban areas. Constructed wetlands are for Senegal are an effective option, effective solutions for peri-urban and rural areas because of its low operation and maintenance costs. But as Carol mentioned, at the moment, for Senegal, we have only pilot constructed wetlands that have been implemented. Next, please. So this is an example of the pilot constructed wetlands that was installed in 2018 in Gaston Berger University in Saint-Louis, north of Senegal. It's still operational. It's used to treat the wastewater in the campus. And as you can see, it's a mix of vertical flow constructed wetlands and horizontal flow constructed wetlands with a first treatment with a septic tank, and the treated wastewater is used for irrigation. Next, please. Another pilot constructed wetland that was also implemented in 2018 is located in the wastewater treatment plant of Pekin. Pekin is a suburb of Dakar in Senegal, and it's a very simple system configuration with a first treatment with a septic tank, a second treatment with a constructed wetlands, and then the water is stored in a storage tank for reuse. So you can see that after 1 year of installation, the system is still operational, and you can see the reeds in the constructed wetlands that are growing and operational to treat wastewater. Next, please. So this is the oldest pilot constructed wetland series that was implemented in Senegal. It's from 2003. I've met with the two researchers that are in charge of this one, and they are very strong expertise on this. It is located in the IFAN, a part of the University Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar. So you can see this system as a first treatment. You cannot see in the picture, but the system as a first treatment with a septic tank. And then it goes to a layer of vertical flow constructed wetlands. And this one is planted with Typha latifolia. Next, please. In the same system, so it's kind of a star with a branch, and you have each branch of the star has been used to experiment different kind of plants. This one is with Pistia stratiotes, and it's also it's a mix of, it can be used as a vertical constructed wetlands or horizontal flow constructed wetlands based on how you put the valves. Next, please. And this last one is planted with the last branch of one of the last branch of this system is planted with vetiver. It has also been tested. So advantages of constructed wetlands in Senegal, I've taken examples of this because it's been experimented by NGOs, local NGOs, and small businesses to make building bricks with Typha. So you saw Typha, this tree that is being used in the pilot in the University Cheikh Anta Diop. It's also used to make roofs or fences, and as well as insulation material. But most important, it's used as a biofuel to replace coal, which is a very good alternative, and it's widely accepted by the communities in Senegal. Next, please. So the way forward, to put consolidated wetlands at scale in Senegal would be to raise awareness of NAS and sanitation experts to advocate for this development, implement more pilot consolidated wetlands for the small cities and for some rural areas up to 10,000 inhabitants. Where there will be available space, because the space is the issue. We have to implement consolidated wetlands, and also involve sanitation stakeholders at community level, government level, private level, and research level. So put them all together to participate in this pilot consolidated wetlands. Also, this should be the training on consolidated wetlands should be put in the educational curriculum of universities. It's already the case for a university, Cheikh Anta Diop, but it should be put at the national level as well. And at the local level, local farmers should be trained in its operation and maintenance of consolidated wetlands, and see how it can contribute to develop generate income through the development of agriculture, also like such as fish farming, that can help them to increase their economic wealth. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Theo. So from Senegal, we're going to move to the Philippines with Jay Tuckson, who is President and CEO of Global Water Solutions. Briefly, Jay has experience in municipal infrastructure programs, wash and climate change policy, and he has experience in the Asia-Pacific region. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Carol. Good day, everyone. I'm Jay Tuckson. I'm a senior wash specialist based in Manila, the Philippines. Today we'd like to share with you some information on the current status of the implementation of sustainable use of constructed wetlands in the Philippines. First, a few information about the Philippines. The Philippines is an archipelago of 919 plus million Filipinos, and is composed of 3 major islands, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The entire country is made up. Can you show the first slide, though, please? Yeah, thank you. And the entire country is made up of about 7,600 islands, comprising of 82 provinces. These provinces are further subdivided in geopolitical territories of 149 cities and about 1,400 municipalities that we refer to as local government units, or LGUs. In each LGU, there's a designated water and sanitation service provider, made with the LGU itself, or a separate quasi-government unit called the Water District. In the 2015 census, access to water supply and sanitation services was reported in the drafting of the first ever Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan, based on 2 main sources. First, they come from the country's Philippine Statistics Office and from the Joint Monitoring Program of WHO and UNICEF. You can see some variation on the statistics. The discrepancy may be attributed to the changing definition of access and the reporting mechanisms employed from the local to the national level. Filipinos with no access to basic sanitation services are often referred to as openification. Were reported that approximately 4% of the population for all over the country for that same census here. Next, please. The picture shown here of wastewater treatment plants in this slide, using constructed wetlands in the cities of Bayawan and Dumaguete, are iconic, if not symbolic, of the use of constructed wetlands in the Philippines. They are the first ones to be established in the country and part of the very few that can be cited as examples. The use of constructed wetlands in the Philippines somehow follows the trajectory of the implementation of wastewater management projects by LGUs, or water districts. There's very little application of constructed wetlands in the Philippines, and therefore very few cases that can be cited. Sanitation or wastewater management projects are also not actively implemented or practiced in the country. In the water supply and sanitation master plan, it was estimated that only 12% of the population is covered by septage management services, while 70% of the population is covered by sewerage services. And the bulk of these services are found mainly in Mega Manila. More than 80% of households in the Philippines resort to the use of septic tank system, while the rest end up draining to drainage canals or open water bodies. There's no singular authority that manages water sanitation in the Philippines, unfortunately. The water sector is quite fragmented. Most of the wastewater treatment system in place make use of mechanized systems or technologies. This is mainly due to national regulations, zoning guidelines, policies, and programs on wastewater treatment being ambivalent or mostly neutral in the use of specific technologies or approaches. Next, please. In the implementation of sanitation projects and programs, there's also no clear vision or target set prior to the approval of the and adoption of the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan in 2019 from the government or from donor agencies. The master plan is now being implemented and recommends 8 reform areas to be pursued. This was triggered by Supreme Court mandamus in 2018 that called to task national agencies and local governments on their responsibility to preserve water quality and mitigate water pollution. So the sector is in the threshold of reforming the institutions, procedures, and policies to improve water quality and prevent further water pollution. Now, however, the changing of the definition of access, sanitation access, that is, from the MDGs to the SDGs, and the changing water effluent standards are causing some degree of confusion and difficulties in implementing, monitoring, and reporting access and other results, and questions particularly the use of constructed wetlands as an effective approach to meet national sanitation targets and standards. In the 30 or so sewage and septic treatment projects in the country, the 4 known projects that use constructed wetlands as an approach are now showing issues and difficulties in operation and expansion. Some are underutilized and some are under capacity. This is a manifestation of poor support in designing and maintaining wastewater treatment facilities using constructed wetlands as an approach. Next, please. Finally, as a way forward, development partners and responsible national agencies need to be more introspective on possible entry points to how constructed wetlands as an approach can be introduced or mainstream in national and local regulations, programs, guidelines, and policies. It needs to be rationalized since there is an appropriate mechanism for adopting nature-based solutions. This can be supported by sustained promotion campaigns and training of identified implementers that are backed up by real mandates to implement the use of constructed wetlands. Some of these potential entry points are mentioned here. These include the present call to review the Clean Water Act, also the establishment of the newly the creation of the Department of Water Resources and its ensuing water programs, and the determination of national key performance indicators, criteria for giving out seal of good local governance to LGUs, and enhancing the parameters for performance benchmarking among the different water service providers in the country. These, of course, are just some of ways to promote constructed wetlands or nature-based solutions. Still, there could be other ways to do this. Thank you. Let us know if you have any specific question in this short presentation.
Excellent. Thanks,
Karen.
Jay. I'd like to remind all the attendees that they can type their questions at any time, and we have been receiving questions. That's really great. Thanks so much for your interest. So now from the Philippines, we're moving to Jordan. So here we have also Jay's email, and then we're moving to Jordan with Dr. or Professor Arwa Abdelhai, who is a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the German Jordanian University. Her expertise is in water security, wastewater treatment and reuse, solid waste management, and climate change resilience. Over to you, Dr. Professor Abdelhai.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot, Carol, for having me today, and thanks for you all to join this session. I will be talking very briefly throughout my presentation today about the implementation of constructed wetlands as my colleagues, but this time in Jordan. And I'll be focusing throughout the presentation on 2 points: the current status of implementation of these systems, and secondly, the future goals of the country. And also I will be highlighting the role that these systems could play in improving water security. Can you please put the first slide? Yeah, so as you may know, Jordan is a water and resource scarce country, and the population in Jordan suffers from different challenges related to arid and semi-arid climate, which is manifested by the fact that more than 92% of our land is receiving less than 200 millimeters of rainfall. And the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, which is the governmental entity in Jordan responsible for the water sector, reported that we have 3 water sources. The main one is groundwater, and by the way, we are over abstracting groundwater to meet the demand, so we go beyond the safe yield. Secondly, we have surface water, and finally, due to water scarcity, what we are trying to do is to support the water budget of Jordan by collecting wastewater and treating the wastewater. So in regard to the sanitation context, 65% of the Jordanian households are connected to the centralized sewage system. However, 35% they rely on safe on-site sanitation. And therefore, we are shooting to look for new systems, cost-effective and efficient, that can support the centralized wastewater treatment plants, because these, like the centralized approach, is costly and cannot accommodate for the increasing discharge of wastewater, and of course cannot serve the rural settings and particularly also the unsewered areas. Next, please. So where do we stand today? Some of the centralized wastewater treatment plants in Jordan started already to integrate constructed wetlands in their system. So I am just indicating here 3 examples in 3 different governorates in Jordan: Karak, Shobak, and Ma'an. And all of them, they have employed the horizontal flow constructed wetland system for treatment. However, one point worth to mention is that there is no, I would say, monitoring tests conducted due to the lack of implementation and monitoring guidelines at the national level. Next, please. So, and the centralized wastewater treatment plants are not the only locations where constructed wetlands have been integrated to address the water scarcity challenge. Different research platforms as well as pilot sites have been established in order to demonstrate the effectiveness of these systems. I'm just indicating here one of these of the various examples we have right now in Jordan in rural settings. So we have one governorate, Jarash, and one village where constructed wetlands have been established. For example, one of the systems here in 2015 where multiple dwellings were connected, and then the system has been expanded to include more dwellings. So what I want to say in principle, these systems show promises in investing or these initiatives, show promises in investing in these systems in order to address the different challenges, especially to serve rural settings and unsewered areas, because I mentioned that we have 35% not connected to the central sewage system. Next, please. Okay, so in terms of the future goals for constructed wetlands, of course, these implementations needs to be scaled up, and in order to include, of course, different regions, also to include additional wastewater treatment plants, centralized one. And in order to truly scale up this implementation, we need to integrate constructed wetlands into the national water management strategies. And to also achieve this goal, we should consider also innovations. Just as an example, we can develop systems where constructed wetlands are combined or coupled with other treatment technologies to ensure effectiveness. And we need to consider also cost-effective methods for maintenance and monitoring to ensure that we have long-term sustainability for these systems. Of course, one last element that has been also mentioned in the other context, it is capacity building, where local communities and professionals need to be trained, and this has to be underpinned, of course, definitely by long-term funding and partnership. Next, please. So in summary, I can say that constructed wetlands in principle are effective, especially in our context where water is really scarce, effective in addressing in a sustainable way the water challenges in Jordan. But of course, for that, it's highly needed to have a continued investment and innovation to truly scale this impact and implementation. Of course, for the stakeholders, they have to work jointly. So we have to bring everyone on board and we have to break the silos so that we can reach an expansion of the implementation of these systems. One point also is very key here and critical is to ensure acceptance across the community, and that's why we need to promote awareness and education. And finally, what I would say that we in Jordan, we are looking forward to meet the future water needs in Jordan, which is quite challenging, in a sustainable way to ensure or to improve water security in Jordan without compromising the environment or the ecosystem in Jordan. So having said that, I come to the end of my presentation, and I would love also to receive your questions. Thank you so much. Over to you, Carol.
Thanks so much, Professor Abdelhai. So from Jordan, now we are going to move to Kenya. Okay, with Chris. Chris is currently a project manager at Habitat for Humanity, and he is a WASH expert, experienced in wastewater treatment, especially constructed wetlands. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate, fellas. I'm under tree in Kenya. At the moment in Kenya, it's evening. I hope you can all see. So before we go into the slides, kindly, Carol, please put up the first slide. Now, the population of Kenya at the moment as we speak stands at 56 million. And with this population standing at 56 million, 60% of Kenyans are having access to safe water, and only 29% are having access to sanitation. With that one having been mentioned, Kenya faces significant challenges and disparities in sanitation between urban and the rural areas. Most of this experience in the urban centers due to the rapid urbanized population that is coming up in Kenya, and due to the rapid urbanization and increased population, there is strained infrastructure. So the status of sanitation in Kenya, we have what is making it hard for us to achieve 100% access in sanitation between the limited financial resources and the outdated infrastructure that we have that is helping us in waste management and wastewater management.
Chris, maybe if you can speak directly to your screen so we can hear you better. At the beginning, you were great. So yeah, since you are saying interesting things, so we don't want to miss them. This is good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're getting me now? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I was saying challenges in sanitation and in Kenya that we have are in the infrastructure and the services. And also there's a lack of awareness, and also there is on proper sanitation practices that we're supposed to be doing in Kenya. We also have outdated infrastructures in Kenya that is limiting achievement of good sanitation and water supply, safe water supply to the people. We also have limited financial resources that would help beef up or realign the existing water structures and manage the water infrastructures that are there. Kindly the next slide. The current status of constructed wetlands in Kenya, it is increasingly being adopted in Kenya according to their cost effectiveness and the ability to operate without the complex technology that we're using. Because most in Kenya we have oxidation ponds, and we also have wastewater treatment plants that are also existing in Kenya. There are several constructed wetlands across Kenya. There are very many. Many are implemented by the NGOs. Some are by community groups, addressing the needs for the wastewater management. So just by examples, as you can see there's some in Nairobi, the Dandora treatment plant, there's some in Kibera, still in Nairobi, in Nakuru. Actually, Kenya is politically divided. We have a national government that oversees the overall implementation and management of water resources, and we have political boundaries called the county governments, and they're divided into 47 counties in Kenya. So those counties in Kenya also are headed up by governors, and all those countries have departments. And one of the departments is the Department of Water. So these are the ones which assist in implementation of actualizing what is recommended by the national government. Next slide, please. The changes and the future directions of the constructed wetlands. So this duration is between 2015 and 2024. We've had evolution in the use of design of constructed wetlands. So because over the past decade, Kenya has been advancing in the design of the constructed wetlands, including the use of hybrid systems that combine the vertical and horizontal flow designs for more efficient treatment. So the recent innovations that we've implemented and we've used, one of them is integration of solar-powered pumps and biofiltration systems. This one is we are doing it in Nairobi, and in Kibera it is functioning very well. So these improvements have enhanced the efficiency and the scalability of constructed wetlands in its different contexts. Also, the national policies and the strategies, the government is also incorporating constructed wetlands into its national sanitation strategies currently, and this is promoting a viable option for sustainable development, and also policies formulating both in the national government and the board government, just like I said, because those are the political ones can also encouraging the use of green infrastructure for wastewater treatment. So the key challenges, like I mentioned earlier, we have adequate funding due to the existing resources by the ever increasing population, land use conflicts, brought by lack of awareness amongst the community, the limited public awareness, and also shortage of technical experts. Maybe we are just few in Kenya that have the idea, but those who also have the expected knowledge that will also call for training and capacity building. So on the way forward, in Kenya, there's need for capacity building and the community involvement, and also policy support.
Thanks.
That is all.
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, perfect. This is really great. We're going to move to the R just to be able to go over a few questions. Thank you so much for this presentation. And then, yeah, it's really impressive the amount of innovative technologies in Kenya that are being implemented. So now we are going to move to the last presentation from Dominican Republic with Emmanuel Vargas, who is Water and Sanitation Department Coordinator at Planyaki. Also, Emmanuel is a water expert, and he works on constructed wetlands. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thanks, Carol, for the introduction. So I'm an environmental technician about environmental management. First of all, gonna give a big picture of water treatment in the Dominican Republic, in which only 28 of the wastewater generated is being collected. And of that amount, 38 is being treated, which represents one of the highest problem, the lack of treatment about surface and groundwater pollution. In the country, just 60 water treatment systems, which are centralized water treatment system, based on the technologies such as anaerobic lagoon sedimentation tank outflow anaerobic slope bucket reactor, and large septic system filtration system. So those are the type of technology that are being applied in the DR for water treatment and sanitation. We are facing a big problem, like over 1 million septic tank in the country that represent 46 of the total, represent the largest source of pollution, equivalent to 22 cubic meter by second of sewage being discharged in the environment. It doesn't take into account the latrines and other type of discharge. So, and that could be the scope of application of wetlands or the lack of treatment we have at a domestic use level. Next one, please. So just giving a background of wastewater treatment system based on wetland. The first one, initial implementation, use low test principle, lack of research that didn't allow us to site water treatment system and to improve efficiency. So we didn't have any data to improve anything. So it was now different. Both the government and the public were unfamiliar with the technology, which means so the government didn't have wetland in the technology folder for water treatment, and the public population didn't ask to the government to apply water treatment system based on wetland in their communities. No financial resources for implementation, so the same reason the financial NGO, the financial trust, they didn't know wetland and they didn't have wetland as an option for being implemented. Limited technician capacity for implementation and operation, that was also a barrier that we were facing at the beginning. So the next one, please. The current implementation, so we have over 50 wetlands have been built across the country and spread out in different types of contexts. The government, NGO, private sector are enthusiastic about the technology and are actively promoting its implementation, which is really good. A cluster of organization implementing wetland and promoting them in different type of contexts, taking advantage of this. So the population is also asking for having those type of wetland in their community, mainly in vulnerable community. A partnership between NGO and university on various research projects that allow us to understand the in and out flow, the level of efficiency, and improve future design and implementation. Discussion on the development of new policies, on the government of a new policies for constructed wetlands. So the environmental ministry was relating the wetland with other engineering work, civil engineering work, and that lack of the implementation of wetlands. So it make low the authorization from the government to allow us to implement that type of water treatment system. Next one, please. Those are picture of a set of picture of the different type of project that we have implemented. We have implemented wetland in a school, vulnerable community, private sector, such as university and so on, in many different type of contexts. Moving forward, the next one, please. We are moving forward now with the research, scale up, and sustainability about research, better understanding of constructed wetland. It means in and out flow monitoring monthly, improvement of the design and efficiency, as we have a modeling system, a math system for sizing wetland, scaling up at a government level, achieving government support, so and government to assume the wetland as a technology, implementing pilot project in new regions to allow the population to know better wetland, and sustainability, achieving community engagement and training in the community and operation and maintaining, so building community capacity. Thanks for listening. So
Excellent. Thanks so much, Emmanuel, for sharing experiences from the Dominican Republic. And thanks so much for all the questions in the chat. So this is Emmanuel's email, if you have specific questions for him. And then this is also if you want to email me questions, if we cannot cover them all today. So we're going to try, I know we have a couple minutes left, but feel free to email all your questions and we'll be happy to address them. So, I mean, the big picture is that we saw that consistency in results between the interviews that we conducted and the survey, and there was not a significant difference between the countries. So the big picture is consistent and similar. I'm going to start with the first question. In terms of political government support, is there a tendency for decision makers to believe quantifiable engineered solutions versus hard to quantify nature-based solutions? Over to you, Mark. Would you like to take that one?
Oh, sorry. I think I think that we only have time for one question, so I was going to let you close it out. But what I was going to say is I think there's a few questions that I think were answered in other presentations. But for this question and a few of them, what we found is there were really no statistically significant differences in answers to our survey based upon countries or people's backgrounds. So it doesn't seem to be that there's really big differences in how people are understanding or looking at the data for constructed wetlands in general. Back to you, Carol.
Okay, thanks. And then the second question, what are the operation and maintenance issues in constructed wetlands? Megan?
Sure thing. So a lot of the operation and maintenance for constructed wetlands is especially high at the beginning of construction of them, because it is a lot of repair of soil, ensuring that the soil that's in place to enable proper water flow is in the right position. It is not falling prematurely. A lot of it is also vegetation and upkeep. So there's a lot of physical demand in terms of the immediate need for maintenance and operation.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, thank you so much for attending. Please do email us questions, and we really appreciate your attendance. I hope you found this presentation interesting. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.